Road Transport Future Outlook. Future Strategy sounds a very grand title, but I want to concentrate on just a few issues, particularly regarding CO2 and also how that relates to demands on the improvements from air pollutants, notably Euro 7. I can move the slide. Just to recap where we are now, and of course, since October, as well as the light-duty CO2 regulation, which was agreed before, we now have an agreement on the heavy-duty CO2 regulation, which is applying to the medium and bigger trucks and coaches. For cars and vans, we have the various targets shown there on the left, which are the targets directed at new vehicles. So OEMs have got to reach these fleet reduction targets by 2025, rather soon, by 2030, and this 100% CO2 reduction target by 2035. And for trucks, we have a similar level of aspiration with targets set at the year 2030. And a slight difference, particularly for those vehicles called urban buses, which in many respects are already being driven towards electrification and zero emission technologies already. A 2035 target. And now we don't have a 100% reduction target. We have a 90% reduction target by 2040, slightly later than cars and vans for the bigger trucks. But that's given some flexibility to the truck industry. And of course, when you consider the various types of trucks on the roads, there are some types of technologies which really couldn't go in one particular direction. Of course, manufacturers are banking heavily on electrification, but we should recall also that these targets are not bans of a certain technology, they are a CO2 reduction target. So at the moment, the vehicle manufacturers take under their own responsibility the choice of the technology routes which they will have to go, because in the end, if they don't meet those targets, the penalties can be quite substantial. But that doesn't mean to say that other avenues of achieving greenhouse gas or CO2 reduction targets are not applicable. Now, when we started discussing Euro 7 3.5 or more years ago, and particularly when the Commission made its proposal in November 2021, we had not an issue with having a Euro 7 standard, but our main issue was the impact that such an ambitious proposal from the Commission, and certainly it was very ambitious compared to the discussions that had taken place earlier, would lead to quite massive investments in Euro 7 for a technology which was being pushed away by the CO2 regulations, you might say, and which would cost a lot. And in our view was that it would mean a lot of shifting of financial and engineering resource over to developing a Euro 7 standard, which are already being implemented with regards to achieving CO2 targets through electrification, hybridization, and other means. Certainly, the proposal that we saw on Euro 7 was in no way soft. Some parties were claiming that it was just a matter of tweaking a few things and we've got Euro 7, but no. The claimed low cost of Euro 7 and the high benefits, in our opinion, were simply not there. And this is one of the main reasons why one key element or one key pillar of our advocacy strategy was to make sure that coordination between the demands of Euro 7 and CO2 policy was sensibly made. For trucks, this is part of our policy papers, and it remains part of our policy. It's just an illustration how even the truck industry sees the move. But of course, to go towards 2040, 90% reduction, that's not going to happen overnight. And there is a long transition period before we get there to achieve essentially fossil-free by 2040. Now, that means that there is going to be a demand to move away from fossil fuels. The combustion engine will improve. Euro 7 means it has to improve as well, but there will be a need to continue the combustion engine and show the potential of the combustion engine to help reduce CO2 emissions. So there is a role for moving away from fossil fuels to more sustainable climate or carbon neutral fuels. But at the same time, the manufacturers are looking heavily and investing where the sector is capable to accept such investments at the moment in zero emission technologies, battery electric, but essentially also hydrogen powered, both as a means of fueling fuel cells, but also as a means of being used in a combustion engine to reduce quite effectively both emissions and also CO2 emissions. So the roadmap is long, but there does offer ample opportunity for a number of different elements to contribute to that roadmap towards 2040 fossil-free environment for the truck fleet. The Commission's proposal on Euro 7 didn't really address modelling of benefit, we thought. So, we made our own modelling. This was done and reported in 2021, and the link, I think, on this slide will lead you to it. But one of the key things that came out of this, whatever the stringency of the Euro 7 standard, including a zero emission standard, which is completely impracticable, of course, such a Euro 7 would have a very marginal impact on road transport NOx emissions compared to the natural fleet reduction of the older fleet with the clean Euro 6 vehicles, cars, vans and trucks, which are already being sold and implemented throughout the European Union at the moment. That would deliver quite a big impact itself. But if you combine that together with the progress on electrification to zero emissions and looking more closely at stimulating fleet renewal through accelerating the fleet renewal, especially pre-Euro 6, to replace those vehicles with the latest Euro 6, that has a much bigger impact on road transport NOx emissions and far outweighs any additional impact that Euro 7 would offer compared with the fleet renewal scenario. Further studies allowed us to look at the development of the fleet. This is just picking out a couple of things, but we use the same models, excuse me, as the European Commission has in terms of the road transport emissions and fleet models. And the slide on the top left there gives an indication as we go through the years to 2050 of the number of Euro 6 vehicles penetrating the fleet, the number of Euro 7 vehicles that will potentially penetrate the fleet, shown in the narrow blue band in the middle. And the stuff above the blue band is essentially the contribution of zero emission vehicles. The initial models using the Sybil road transport emissions and fleet models had very poor assumptions in the years 2020 and 2021 regarding the rate of electrification of the fleet, which we updated with our own quite conservative assumptions. And you can see that the pace of moving towards zero emission vehicles far outweighs the contribution of Euro 7 when it comes to cars. A similar picture can be seen in the bottom right there, where we have in green the Euro 6 heavy duty fleet. The blue is the contribution of the Euro 7 fleet, and the yellow is the contribution of the zero emission fleet. These are new vehicles, of course, coming into the fleet. The bottom is the pre-Euro 6. So in all respects, you can see that the potential of Euro 7 in terms of its presence in the fleet in the future is quite small compared to the impact which the CO2 regulations themselves will have on driving the sales of zero emission vehicles in the future. My presentation is rather short, so I just want to wrap it up here and by basically saying that it's clear that with the introduction for the last few years now and various iterations of Euro 6, the vehicles and the vehicle manufacturers are playing their part with the introduction of these latest clean vehicles, coupled with all of the impact now, not on lab emission results, but on-road emission results. These vehicles are actually on the road emitting very low levels of emissions. Fleet renewal of the older vehicle park with the latest Euro 6 trucks and cars and vans, it does make a difference, but in our view, there are real benefits to be made by accelerating and investing in accelerating the pace of fleet renewal with the latest Euro 6 vehicles. Our studies showed that Euro 7 at the most stringent level will deliver quite marginal benefits as we move towards zero emission tailpipe emissions. And of course, zero emission tailpipe through electrification still has many open issues on infrastructure, but of course we also have many open issues on other solutions like carbon neutral fuels as well. But we were happy that in many respects, the decision of the co-legislators just recently on Euro 7 now recognises that in terms of tailpipe, we're doing pretty well, and there doesn't need to be too many changes on tailpipes. But the key thing will be the contribution of non-exhaust vehicle particle emissions coming from brake wear and coming from tyre abrasion. For brake wear for cars, we already had a methodology, and Euro 7 has introduced limit values. The methodology and the limit values for brake wear from heavy-duty vehicles is still in development. And tyres are being looked at also in Geneva in developing a methodology to evaluate the rates of tyre abrasion for various types of particle and ultrafine particle plastic type emissions. For us, as representing the vehicle industry, we have a European market, the common market, the internal market, where we can approve a vehicle in one member state and it's accepted for sale in all of those other member states. That remains a key aspect for how this industry operates. Of course, cities have been able to introduce local measures in terms of traffic restrictions or in terms of assigning Euro categories or other categories to the vehicles which they accept to circulate within their cities. That's fine, but what we don't want to see is a patchwork. There should at least be a high level of coordination amongst the EU member states and the cities. Of course, those cities and regions have to implement the ambient air quality requirements, but there has to be coordination amongst different measures on restrictions. Otherwise, the public will just lose faith and interest in such schemes. Now, but before I pass the baton over to Thanasis, just to note that we, as Concawe, did collaborate on a science-based study to help advocate these and other messages. So, Alan, I will now pass back to you.